So why don't we get started, Mr. Manzi?
Okay, one moment. Okay,
Good evening. It is 7:35, and I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Common Council for June 20th, 2023. Please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag. Ms. Dixon, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Burnett,
present.
Mr. Camacho, Mr. Goldstein,
Here.
Ms. Najolski Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Ayers, Mr. Uvelman,
Present.
Ms. Revoluz, Ms. Young, Mr. Kites, Ms. McMurr,
Present.
Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan,
Here.
once again, Mr. Camacho, Ms. Ayers, Ms. Revoluz, Ms. Young, Mr. Kites, Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have seven members of the
Okay.
Common Council.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public participation. Do we have anybody wishing to address the council?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
The first person is Diane Laricella.
Okay, Ms. La Rochella, you have the floor.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Larry, can you move Tyler Fairburn over as a panelist, please?
And could we record the participants from the Charter Revision Commission for the record?
I'm sorry?
Can we acknowledge the presence for the record of the Charter Revision members present for the meeting?
Sure. We have Carl Dickens, Patsy Brescia, the chair, Benita Watford Riley, Angela Wasuna, Tyler Fairburn. I believe that's it. Am I correct? And of course,
That's
Mr. Mednick.
Thank you.
Ms. La Rochella, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mayor, Common Council, Chairwoman Brescia, and all the members of the Charter Revision Commission. My name is Diane Laricella, 21 Little Fox Lane. Again, I want to thank you all for undertaking this monumentous exercise. Of course, some of us wish it had started several years ago, but nothing like now. Just would have given us a little more time to make more changes that are needed. My understanding is tonight you're going to be looking at Articles 5 through 8, and I really appreciate the sequential ways you are doing this. Under Article 5, Mayor, I wanted to ask that this Common Council make sure that this is a separate question on the ballot should you decide to move any of the questions to ballot, which I hope you will. It is because, of course, it's contentious and we don't want to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater after all that work for people that may have a difference. I do ask that we might want not to even address this issue, although I do believe that we should have a 4-year mayor, but with term limits. Again, not in any way speaking about the current mayor, but future mayors. We understand under special act in the legislature. So once I will be asking that the legislature move to have a special act for term limits in our city. Under 5-3 under appointments, again, not knowing who the mayor will be in the future, but also for our current a situation. I ask possibly the addition under appointments for ensuring gender and racial equity whenever possible. Under 5-6 city clerk, I wanted to see if we could add language that understands that at least the assistant city clerk is an assistant to the common council to help the mostly unpaid common council members with their administrative research and copies. I don't see any language in the document that talks about assigning proper administrative help to our common council members. Article 7, boards and commissions. I again ask that we look at gender and racial equity as part of the general requirement under 7-1. As we know, some of our boards and commissions still are struggling to have any women, if not more than one woman on them. And of course, we want to strive for racial equity. And I know that this mayor and council have attempted that, but we have to go farther. I ask that we also consider elected Board of Estimate and Planning and Zoning Commissioners. I don't see where that was really discussed. And possibly this common council may want to send this back for discussion. I want to make sure that there are public comment portions for all boards and commissions at some point in a board and commission meeting. Right now, the Conservation Commission, my understanding, other than a regulatory public hearing, is the only commission that allows the public to speak about ideas and suggestions on good things, positive things. And so I ask that you all consider inserting something about public comment portion. Lastly, because it's section Article 8 under department and department heads, I ask that while I was initially in favor of this extra layer of government, I will ask that you consider adding language that states that said division chiefs and department heads should strive, or maybe must, have a public meeting for their related divisions with the residences. It seems like since we got to me, and I get quite involved with administrative good governance, that there's more of a distance, not a closer connection of the residents to these division chiefs, many of which are wonderful, hardworking folks, but we'd love to get to know them better. So please consider at least a minimum annual meeting for each division with the residents. Thank you very much for your service, and I appreciate the consideration.
Thank you, Ms. LaRochella. Mr. Manzi, is there any other person indicating they wish to speak to the council?
Yes. Elsa Obuski.
Ms. Obachowski, you have the floor.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I'm Elsa Obachowski, 41 East Avenue. I want to echo what Diane LaRochella said about thanking the commission for their hard work, and to underscore about putting things on the ballot in November individually. We really don't want the baby thrown out with the bathwater, and it's clear that the commission has worked really hard to make the charter more navigable, more understandable, more relevant to the 21st century. So if somebody wants to vote against a particular provision, I hope that that wouldn't cause people to vote down the whole idea of the revision. That's really all I have to say at this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Obachowski. Mr. Manzi?
Yes, if anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now, and I will promote you to a panelist. There's no one else. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'd like to move the agenda onto item 4, which is to review Articles 5 through 8 of the draft normal charter proposed by the Charter Revision Commission. I'll turn the running of this section over to our attorney, Steve Mednick, who will lead us in the Council and Charter Revision Commission in discussion of those articles.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to put a PowerPoint on the screen and try to walk through the sections that way. Is that okay, or do you want me to do the charter itself?
I would vote for this, Steve.
All right. So let's try to go through this. Let me point out one thing for the record at the outset. I'll get to it in a few minutes on boards and commissions, but and I normally don't respond to public comments, but I want to point out that at our last meeting, we went over section 2-6, which is in the beginning of the charter, which talks about the need for active, informed, inclusive, and equitable engagement of community members, with a specific element on a specific focus on diversity of all forms: race, religion, gender, age, national origin, ancestry, neighborhood, backgrounds. All that kind of stuff is really dealt with in the beginning of the charter, and I just wanted to point that out for the record, that has been addressed by the Charter Commission, if that's okay. So this is a section we, and with all due respect to the mayor, we didn't change an awful lot. There are really no substantive changes in this section. The commission did not address any of the issues of balance between the mayor and the legislative body, the Common Council, and because, again, the focus is, Chair Brescia pointed out last week, was on reforming the document, not the government, and it's one of the reasons we will have, we're recommending a charter revision within the next 2 years. The organization of the section talks about the statutory authority of the mayor, and I want to point out for the record that there are only 2 required provisions of a charter. One is this one, which you have to name your chief executive officer. In the case of Norwalk, that is the mayor. And the other one is the legislative body, the Common Council. You are the only 2 provisions that absolutely have to be in a charter under Connecticut state law. All the other provisions can be approved by ordinance. If you wanted to have a real spirit charter, you could do a lot of things by ordinance, but these 2 provisions need to be in the charter. We go through the powers and duties as we did with the legislative authority. We didn't pare down the mayor's powers. We just pared down the language relating to the mayor's powers. Remember, it's stated broadly in the charter, but the reality is the Home Rule Act and the Municipal Powers portion of the Home Rule Act really lay out all the authority that you really need to run a home rule community such as Norwalk. The mayoral appointment authority remains unchanged in this regard. We have an ancient provision on hindering, resisting, and abuse of the mayor. It's kind of old language, but we still thought it was important to include and retain in the charter. The only new language in the charter deals with the organization of the office of the mayor. Heretofore, there's never been mention of a chief of staff or an equivalent position, and such other clerical and assistants for which sufficient funds must be appropriated in the operating budget. The structure you have, that's not really an issue, but language like that is important in the event you have a legislative body that has more authority on the budget. You want to make sure that the mayor can't defund the legislative body can't defund the mayor. We also include in here reference to the division chiefs. We don't name them here. We name them in the department section of the charter, as we'll see in a few minutes, but we talk about giving flexibility to have division chiefs with professional qualifications in the fields of endeavor that are covered by their positions: economic and community development, community and human services, public administration, operations, infrastructure, public works, public safety, and finance. And so that is laid out clearly, and that has not heretofore been in the charter, but it is laid out in the current proposal of the charter. And the last provision is we do discuss the city clerk, the role of the city clerk appointed by the mayor within the office of the mayor, provides assistance to the council, and just lays out those that basic authority. And so that's the essence of Article 5. I don't know if there are any questions on the mayoral section. If
Mr. Joe
not,
Geithner?
I'm sorry. Yep.
Thank you so much, Steve. And I apologize again for not getting you these, my comments in advance as I intended to. And I really have very fluid on this one. I just had one quick question. As Miss Laura Cella, so I know that we're very much trying to not change the existing charter, which we're all for. But Ms. Laura Cella did raise a point in relation to the assistant city clerk, although it is not, to the best of my knowledge, ever been in the charter that the assistant city clerk is typically has taken the role of assisting the council. My understanding is that has been the practice. And I didn't know what you thought about incorporating that provision, because it is in fact a historic practice and wouldn't therefore be a major change. So I was curious about your thoughts on that.
Look, I'm a strong advocate for staffing city council, and any direction is not problematic from my point of view. And right now, it's section 5-6D deals with the appointment of assistant city clerk. I think that's a political judgment you need to make. I don't think it's a substantive change, and it would be relatively easy to make if that's the direction the council wants to take.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think that the newlywed has a question. The distinguished newlywed from Norwalk. Josh
Thanks, that's
Goldstein.
funny. Yeah, so I, like Nora, will apologize that I didn't get my comments to you earlier, but hey, at least I have a good excuse. So on the section about the city clerk, specifically A, where it says that the city clerk is appointed with approval of the council for a term of 2 years. I was curious, considering given the functions that the city clerk plays and how integral that position is to the mayor and the mayor's office, why it was chosen to be structured this way versus, frankly, how the mayor appoints a chief of staff and a corporation counsel that serves coterminous with the mayor. I didn't know if that was something that was discussed or not, but I just made a note in my own notes about this.
It was not discussed. I think we just left it the way it is in the current charter. I don't know if any members of the Charter Commission had thought about it. It was not an issue that was discussed, and I did not raise it substantively.
Yeah.
Patsy, do you have any
Yeah,
thoughts?
I agree that we didn't discuss it, and that might have been an oversight. There was never any negative discussion not to change it, have it go in line with all the other appointments. So I don't perceive that as an issue for the commission, but maybe other commissioners might want to address their concern or their thoughts.
No, I would agree. It's Carl Dickens. I would agree with you. And as Steve said, that's up. It needs to be changed, and council wants it changed. I think that's something to look at. I don't have any objections to it.
So it sounds, Councilman Goldstein, that if you make a recommendation, it sounds like the commission would be favorably disposed. That's
Okay, I can speak with my colleagues further about this on the council as well, and see if I'm not the only one who is thinking this might be a wise idea.
All right. I think that the president has his hand up.
Yep, Mr. Burnett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mednick. I was just looking for further clarification on the assistant city. You mentioned adding, are specifically talking about adding specific roles and responsibilities of the city clerk as it relates to providing assistance directly to the council?
That seems to be the question that was raised by your colleague that, and by the speaker in the public testimony that, I have no direct knowledge of this, that the assistant city clerk currently provides, or historically has provided staff assistance to the council. And the question that the council member raised was whether we should simply institutionalize it in the document itself. I think the question of going beyond providing staff assistance and turning it into a research and subject matter expert position is a totally different issue. But I think, and I don't want to speak for the council member, but I think that the intent of her question, the way I read it, was to simply memorialize the current practice. And I can't speak to the current practice, but that's the way I heard it.
So you will further input in terms of what the thinking is as it relates to the role of the assistant city clerk and the relationship to the common council.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the way,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, Mr. President, the way where we are right now, let me just remind you, because you don't do this every day of the week. Where we are right now is we're in a place where we're seeking recommendations from the council so that you can, instruct me to draft language when we get to a point where we can do that, or you can simply put together a list of things that you'd like the commission to then consider in its last go around. And so we need some level of specificity so that, so we can actually come up with something that would be ultimately supported and entertained by the council in the last analysis. So that's where we stand. So we would need specific guidance on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Just a quick note, if I may. When this council started this term, I believe we did a complete rewrite of the job description of the city clerk, assistant city clerk. And it very well may be in there that the assistant city clerk is there to assist the council. And that's always been the practice, but if you wish to put it in the charter, I mean, it might be a good place, but we should also take a look at the new job description.
I believe you're correct, Mayor. That's actually what I was going to say. And I agree with Councilmember Najelski-Eichner that we could just flesh that out a little bit more. It doesn't have to be specific like a job description, but I do think there is a line in the description we had put together when we were interviewing for assistant city clerk this last term. So I think we could definitely look at that and truncate it for this purpose.
Okay. Ms. Young, I believe you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. So as someone who served as assistant city clerk, I think that is an important role that definitely needs to stay in that charter and maybe get some more definition to what the roles and responsibilities are. But I think that it is definitely something that needs to be fleshed out, but is an absolutely necessary position. I think as the city grows and the council requires a lot more assistance and information, I think that's important.
Ms. Brescia, do you still have your hand up or?
No, but I'm happy to support that concept.
Okay.
And Council
McMurray?
Member McMurray.
I apologize. I yield the floor.
Okay, Mr. Mednick?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move on to Article 6. I don't think this will be a
I'm
long.
sorry. If I can jump in, this is David Huvil, and I threw my hand up late. Sorry about that. I'm going to ask a question, and this is probably more so to my colleagues and to the mayor's office. The question that I have is the workload such that we have grown to a place where there needs to be an assistant city clerk, but there also needs to be an assistant to the legislative body? So that's a question that I would ask my colleagues, if they think that what happens is that the assistant city clerk's position gets so enveloped into day-to-day operational things that we're not feeling the support. And am I wrong in thinking that we're looking at two different positions here? And I would ask that question. Maybe it's something that we can talk about and come back to you, but I would throw that out there.
The only thing I think I'd say in response to that is just to say that there's going to be a difference between the practical day-to-day realities of this and what goes into the city charter governing document of this city. And I am cautiously in support of what my colleagues have said about inserting, some language that makes it clear that the assistant city clerk's function, and a big part of that person's function, is to assist the council in its duties.
Yes, but if we memorialize it within the charter, it becomes more sacrosanct than if we just create an ordinance or a job description. So that's the reason that I asked the question, because I know it has come up in at other times where we've have expressed need for certain support, and that's why I bring it up.
No.
Ms. Najilski-Eichner?
I would just very briefly add to that, David. I completely agree with you. And I think we need more staff, but I also see this, again, we're not trying to add things here that are new things. So I think that is something for the 2 years from now. I will be advocating very strongly for new staff for us, but I feel like this is one place where within the realm of just maintaining what we currently have, we could at least make clear the importance of staff for the council. So that would be my thought on this one, but I agree with you completely for the second round.
I can tell you that, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, throughout the state, if you look at other charters, there are references, they're usually in the council section itself, to some level of staffing. New Haven has the most elaborate Office of Legislative Services. Hartford now has something that's very similar. But most of the other cities, including Danbury, I believe, and I don't know if Stanford does, but they do have provisions that allow for, in the same way that we just put a provision in that memorializes the need for certain executive staff in the mayor's office, there would be, the place to put it would be in the council section, where the council would then, by ordinance or by budget or however, be able to hire staff to be of assistance. And that could be as little as one person, some clerical assistants, some professional assistants, or it could be larger. I mean, there's not many cities under the top 5 or 6 cities in the state that have substantial offices, but a lot of the councils have at least somebody who is responsible to the leadership and to the members of the body for the administrative operation of the council. Shall I move on, Mayor?
Yes.
So I'm going to go to Article 6. I don't think there's going to be much to discuss here. We basically recite, and I had the town clerk, who happens to be a member of the commission, take a look at the section on the town clerk as it's revised, and we basically adopted it in a manner that is consistent with his understanding of how the office is run. The registrar of voters' powers, I think, are basically a recitation of what is currently in the charter. And this is a section where we retain the position of constable. It's a very minimalist provision, simply says they have those powers that are conferred upon such officers under the general statutes. And we retain the section on sheriff. You will note that the city treasurer and board of selectmen position is not included in this version of the charter. The positions will continue for two more years, but there was really since there are statutes that deal with those positions, then there was really no need to keep them in the charter. So those sections are missing from this article in the charter. Any questions on, see the hands are up. Councilmember Goldstein.
Just one quick question. I noted, of course, where it says in the very beginning, where it says there should be a town clerk as required by the general statutes. does that mean that the general statutes require us to call it the town clerk, even though Norwalk is like definitely not a town?
You can call it a city clerk.
Well, we
The-
have a city clerk. I mean, I guess I've always thought there's been this sort of weird internal consistency with the fact that we both have a city clerk and a town clerk, and they do completely different things. But I just didn't know if there was, I also want to be cautious to not confuse voters who have known that there's a position called the town clerk for a long time. But I do think it's a little strange that we use that term, even though Norwalk is by definition not a town.
New Haven has a city and town clerk. Hartford has a city and town clerk. The statutory position is town clerk, even though in most cases, the city clerk assumes those functions. Your city clerk is not what is classically referred to under the general statutes as the clerk of the municipality. The town clerk has all of the municipal records, the land records, a lot of permits, a lot of other statutory responsibilities. And that's the reason it refers to the general statutes and still retains the position of the title of town clerk. If you were to consolidate, basically the city clerk functions as a clerk to certain entities within the city, but serves more of an administrative function within the mayor's office. And I'm not saying you should get rid of it. I mean, you have a tradition, you should retain the tradition, but normally you would combine the two. City clerks in the other cities tend to be the clerk of the legislative body, similar to the city clerk in this case. In that case, it's the statutory office that has those responsibilities. But that's the reason it continues to refer to it as town clerk.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Najolski Eichner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is so small as to almost be a nit, but I did just want to raise in case there was anything substantive to it. So both the city clerk and the town clerk have functions of issuing licenses and permits. I assume, as you were just referring to, those are different licenses and permits depending on sort of their areas of expertise and oversight. But I did just want to, the language is slightly different between the two. The city clerk has B, 3, and 4.
Yep.
The town clerk has B, C only. I just wanted to do a quick double check and make sure there's no substantive difference. There's nothing of importance there
Yeah.
that we should address.
So the town clerk has whatever statutory functions are attributable to town clerks. I think we'd have to, since the city clerk is here, maybe she can tell us. We didn't do a deep dive analysis on what 3 and 4 really meant. I didn't know if there were statutory licenses and permits, or whether the council has given some authority under the code of ordinances to the clerk. That's what it seems to imply. But the town clerk functions are strictly those that are granted by the state, although it's possible that the council could provide ordinance authority for the town clerk to do things. But I think that whatever statutory authority there is for a town clerk would be conferred in that office. The city clerk functions of that nature are functions that would be granted by local legislative action or administrative action. So, we did not do a deep dive into that particular function of the city clerk's office. I'd have ask her to take a look at it and see what she thinks and see what those responsibilities are, if any. We did not do a dive into that.
And to points that you've made earlier, there's no downside to having her have the authority under the charter to do so if we were to want her to be able to do so at some point, right?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. McMurray?
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize if this was spoken about in the last workshop, which I wasn't able to attend, but I know constables and sheriff, I believe, came up. I know we won't want to change anything in the charter that would be significant, but I would argue maybe in the next 2 years when we revisit this, that maybe we don't need as many constables. And I really still do not understand the role of the sheriff. And then this is totally a nit, but I would think that anywhere, and I did see one, but I think it's in the next section and I'll bring it up then if I need to, but anywhere we are mentioning clerk, I just want to make sure we clarify whether it's town clerk versus city clerk in the verbiage. So we're not
Absolutely.
confusing the
When we
two.
get to that, would you please note it?
I sure will.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
we tried to catch all those things, but.
I know it's hard. Well,
yeah,
it's
so,
a big
no, please.
document. I'm not blaming you and I'm an editor by
No,
trade.
no, I'm not,
That's-
no, please edit, please, and let us know. I
Thank
will
you.
point out, your colleagues will probably tell you this too, there was discussion at the meeting last week. There was no resolution, obviously. You'll have to debate and discuss it about whether or not you wanted to modify the number of constables. And I believe that Patsy brought up, the chair brought up and discussed the role of the sheriff at the last meeting as well. The sheriff has service of process authority and not utilized well, but it could be utilized more by the city to help with service of process if that was necessary. But the issue was discussed. I don't think that there was a resolution.
Thank you.
Thank you. And don't forget to tell me about the clerk when we get to it.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on Article 6? Please, I don't want to rush through.
Steve?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, I'm sorry.
Steve, I just want to point out that this section is elected officials, so the city clerk is not here, as that is a staff position.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So now we go to boards and commissions. And in this section, we did do an awful lot to address, again, not to retort or comment on any of the comments made by any of the members of the public. But when you look at the beginning of Article 7, you will see a lot of new language. We really tried to establish provisions that really try to deal with the issue of public engagement, public participation. The only substantive change on any of the boards and commissions was expansion. We'll get to that in a little bit, of the police commission and the fire commission. But the principal objective of the section is it starts off in section 7-1 with the notion of what the general requirements are for boards and commissions. The idea being that the good bulk of your boards and commissions are going to be created by ordinance. And so what we tried to do in the charter was to establish a uniform methodology for appointing and creating boards and commissions. But to start off, what we tried to do is we tried to give the public a sense of what the role of boards and commissions is or are, and that there are different functions that boards and commissions have. There's policy functions, there's advisory functions, quasi-judicial or regulatory functions that occur with the boards and commissions in your community, and in all communities. And the preeminent point that we try to make is that service on a board or commission is not a sinecure. It's basically serving the public interest. And it really a critical element of that, and that's laid out very clearly in the charter. And the reason you put it in the charter is you want the public to be able to throw it in the face of a board or commission member if they are not operating in that way, if they appear to be representing an interest within the community, whatever that may be, whether it's private or perceived as public. It gives the public an ability to say the charter talks about boards and commissions serving the public interest, and we expect people to operate that way. It gives members of boards and commissions a sense of what their functions are with regard to regulatory functions, that their responsibilities are evidence-based, that they really, when they make decisions, they need to make them on the basis of evidence. And what does that mean? It means that when there are hearings and there are public hearings, you should be listening to the public and listening to the evidence that comes in, whether it's expert evidence, public opinion regarding the conditions of their neighborhood, the conditions of a building, a parking lot, a bridge, a street, whatever it may be. that your decisions need to be evidence-based, and the charter really lays that out pretty clearly. It also talks about a point that was made in the public session this evening about open meetings. And these sections have changed a lot during and after the pandemic. A lot more thought has gone into how you actually conduct your meetings. Look at what we're doing tonight. We're all in different places, conducting a public meeting, and hopefully members of the public are watching and participating. Most of the time you'll have a hybrid. You'll have some form of public and remote access. And the objective of the charter is to make sure that the meetings are open in a way so that public can see and hear and be part of all the meetings of your community. Something that a lot of people don't know is that remote meetings have been legal under the FOIA laws since 83. In 1983, there was a little invention roughly during that period of time called the speaker, for a speakerphone that you would put in the middle of a table so that people could hear a voice coming out of the speakerphone. And the Freedom of Information Commission permitted public meetings to be conducted if a member of the board or commission could be heard on the speakerphone and could hear all the participants in the room, all the people in the room. So if there was a public hearing, that person should be able to hear the public and fully participate in the meeting. So Connecticut has had this type of regimen for a long time. We actually used that precedent as we were building the pandemic executive orders to run meetings, and we found that to be very convenient. The charter simply articulates a lot of that here, and we try to establish a standard where the city will continue to migrate toward ensuring optimal technologies are available to all boards and commissions to achieve the objective of public accessibility. I've been careful in the drafts that we've done since the pandemic not to make an absolute standard, because there may be affordability issues, there may be infrastructure issues with the buildings and the rooms, but the objective is to move toward total accessibility in any way you can during the for the operation of your public meetings. Are there any questions on those sections? Because I'm going to move into the administrative requirements. Yeah.
I just have one on page 50.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if the enumerations are right. It says under B, 7(1)B, and you go down 1, 2, and then under quorum, it's another 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah,
And then,
I had the same thing.
Yep,
okay,
there it
and then
is.
the-
You're right.
then
Yep.
the citation about the minority representation should probably be 7(1)B7, I believe.
Let's take a look here.
Steve,
Yes.
we have 2 2s.
I got it. I
Yeah.
picked it up. Mayor gave it to me. I'll fix it. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mhm.
There's a mayor who reads his briefing papers. I'm very impressed. Thank you. Good. That's a great catch. Thank you very much.
I have another comment there on, well, it's marked 3 on page 51, but it's going to become 4, meeting frequency and public notice.
Yeah.
In the middle of the paragraph, failure to obtain a quorum is not be deemed, is not to be deemed.
Not to
We
be
need-
deemed. Yeah.
We need to
Thank
add
you.
2.
Yep, got it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. How many times have we read this document?
I know.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And are there any further questions on those sections? I'll move on to, oh, I see Nora Nujilski Eichner.
Yep. Mr.
Thank you, Steve. Just a couple of quick things on this section. So I just wanted to confirm that I'm understanding correctly the language. So under C, appointment, where it says all boards or commission members shall serve until the completion of their respective terms or until their successors have been appointed and qualified. Am I understanding correctly that that is the language that allows for the new mayor following an election to replace the boards and commissions members, which is a power that I think is granted to the new mayor to do?
I don't, I think that, I'm sorry, was somebody else trying to speak? I think that most of your boards and commissions have terms. If your boards and commissions did not have terms, a new mayor would be able to replace. Is anybody else hearing that? Hello?
Yes.
All right,
Diana.
so,
Yeah, Ms. Revelous, you have to mute.
Okay,
I'm
I'm sorry,
so-
yeah.
so
So
Steve,
yeah,
then I want to refer you back to 5.3A1. Because that reads that the mayor, upon commencement of the term of office, shall, except as otherwise provided, appoint all members of all boards and commissions. So I just want to be clear that I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just want to be clear that I understand what's happening. So your position is that under the charter, the mayor has the ability to appoint all members of all boards and commissions, but the except as otherwise provided in this charter means that people retain their boards and commissions appointments for the length of their
the length
term.
of their term. So I would say to appoint all vacancies for membership of boards and commissions created by this, the general statutes, this charter or ordinance, because if you have a term of office, you don't disrupt the term of office. The person serves for the term of office. That language could be language that is throwback, I'm taking a look here, to the current charter, yep. And I would make it clear that it's vacancies, just to clarify that. Because the intent, when you have terms of office, is you cannot end a term of office unless there's a reason to discharge somebody from a board or commission, remove somebody from a board or commission. But they serve until the end of their term. So if they have a 2-year term, they serve for the full 2-year term. They don't serve at the pleasure of the mayor for most boards and commissions.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to clarify. I think it would be.
I will fix that section. I will clarify that section as well. Thank you.
No, and I really appreciate the clarification because actually I wasn't really sure which way it played out. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Yep. This is a problem. I don't know if Norwalk, I don't think Norwalk has the problems. It hasn't come up in any of the discussions I've had, but in a lot of communities, in fact, next door in Stamford, it's a huge problem where there's a lot of holdover board and commission members. People have held over on boards and commission for 5 years, mainly because the mayor can't be assured that they could put that person back on the board subject to advice and consent. And it's one of the issues we're dealing with right now in the charter in Stamford to try to remedy that problem. I don't know if that exists. I did not get the impression that exists in Norwalk. I believe that Councilmember McMurray has a question.
Here comes my nit. So it's 72, notice to the mayor of vacancy due to resignation. So we say the city clerk is required to send notice, but then we mention clerk twice after that in that same graph. And I just don't know whether it means.
Give me the
city clerk
section number.
continued. 7D as in David 2.
Okay.
And I don't know whether that means assistant city clerk. I don't think it means town.
I think
clerk.
it's a city clerk. I mean, I think it's when I say the clerk of the common council, that is also the city clerk. And I would just repeat, the city clerk must record the date.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Just,
Yeah.
I just would like.
I think,
clarification.
are you
We
okay
have a
with
lot of
clerk? Are you okay with clerk of the council? Just leave it-
I'm okay with it. I don't know if anybody else has an issue with it.
Is I believe they are technically clerk of the council, but I could change it to city clerk in all 3 places.
I would feel comfortable just because we do have so many clerks.
All right, we'll do it.
It's a total nit, but
Got it. No, it's a great net. Thank you.
Mr. Nielsen Eichner,
Why don't you let David go first? Because
Mr. Hooverman.
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, can we go back up to, I think it's 7, Oh, sorry, B4. Clerk, is that's referring, when we're referring to the clerk of each board or commission, are we referring to the staff member that
Correct.
would be assigned to that?
That's why it's a lowercase c. It's not the city clerk or the town clerk. It is a clerk.
Right. Do we need to reference that it can be a staff member, or it is a staff member?
We can say to make certain that
A
each
different
board or
position.
commission has a staff, a staff or other designee assigned or something like that. If you don't want to use the word clerk, if you think that's confusing,
Well,
happy to
I'm
go.
wondering if it's my only confusion is, are we talking about a completely new individual coming on to that, or but we're not, we're speaking about someone who is already a member of city government being assigned to this position, correct?
Well, this is current charter language, so I don't know how you do it. But I'm assuming that all boards and commissions have some staff assistants of some sort, somebody called a clerk, because it's in the current charter. So we didn't look at it carefully, but if I don't know what the current practice is. I'm assuming that
The current practice is that it's a staff
Yeah.
member,
Yeah.
usually relevant to that particular area that the board or commission is servicing. So I just bring it up for clarity, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to change it to have staff assigned to assist, if you think that's clear, and so we don't use the word clerk again one more time, although it's
Yeah, I think
lowercase, so.
we're using clerk a lot, and I think that might get confusing to the public, so.
So is
thank
it
you.
okay if I fix this, is there consensus, I could fix it to be staff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I will do so, thank you, David.
Okay, Mr. Najolski Eichner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the section above that, meeting frequency and public notice. So I certainly understand that generally best practices would be to not miss more than one monthly meeting. As a practical matter, I know that we have some boards and commissions who, just by the nature of their work, don't necessarily need to meet every month. We have boards and commissions that oversee, the ad hoc housing is working on a board and commission right now that is going to be meeting to guide a specific grant funding process that will happen annually. And we were intending to write into the ordinance that they were not expected to meet monthly, because they don't need to. So I don't know if there's any need to have a little additional flexibility here. Also, I know that frequently boards and commissions don't meet for July and August simply on the basis of people's summer vacations and not being able to get quorums. Again, a minor point I just thought I would raise.
Well, what we might do is you might put a saving clause in here that unless otherwise permitted by ordinance.
Yep, that'd be great. Something like that, I think, would just nice to have flexibility.
Yeah, we ended up putting provisions. Let me just write it down. Sorry, give me a second to write it down. Unless otherwise permitted by ordinance. This is for towns that where boards were deliberately not meeting, and members of the public were petitioning for meetings in various controversies where there were controversies. And so over the years, I've developed these provisions to accommodate that, but having the prophylactic, unless otherwise permitted by ordinance, gives you the ability in real time to make exceptions if they need to be made. Like, the tax appeals group probably is not meeting much in July or August. They're meeting during the tax appeal season. So you may want to, take that into account in this provision. This establishes your standard. If we give you a ramp, an exit ramp to assist those bodies that are not trying to evade and elude public responsibility, but don't have a need to meet every month, I think that language would be helpful.
Thank you. And yes, we've been very lucky here. We've had no
Yeah.
such shenanigans that I'm aware of. We have very
Right.
dedicated people.
That's
We're
what the
very
origin
lucky.
of that provision is. And I usually recommend it, and sometimes they'll say, we don't need it. But this way we can fix it.
No, good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mr. Mednick, just a question.
Sure.
Currently, as you know, there are 3 members of the Fire Commission and Police Commission. We're increasing both of them to 5.
Yes, sir.
They're coterminous currently with the mayor's term. So that when the mayor is elected, he or she appoints the police commissioners and fire commissioners.
We did not change that. That's correct.
Okay, because it doesn't really say that in here.
Um,
And then also, the common council at the current time does not approve the appointments of either of those bodies. I guess they're looking to change that.
I thought that that was discussed. Yes, I think the commission approved that. But we did not change the term, but the terms, you're right, the term, it's silent on the
Yeah.
term of office. So they are coterminous with the mayor?
They are.
So that goes back to the other question that was raised. So is there, everybody want to continue in that way? Because it would have to make a recommendation back to the commission to change it. Because I don't think there's language in the charter. I don't think we would have changed that.
No, I don't think there is either.
Yeah,
And that was kind of why I had a question, because the common practice, well, I've been around for 51 years now in the city, so it's always been the mayor, when he or she gets elected, appoints the police commissioners and the fire commissioners.
so that must be what that provision that the council member pointed to a few moments ago. And I'll bet you at one point, most of your boards and commissions were the same way, is my guess.
Mm-mm.
No?
No,
No.
no,
Always
No.
terms? All right, well, look, then we'll, if that's a call that the council has to make, Mayor. But I have a note that that's something that you guys will discuss. Whether we retain it in its current status quo.
and the corporation council and the city clerk are also in that same.
Yes. And the Corp Council,
mode,
Corp
yeah.
Council, by the way, under the charter has a 2-year term. In the current charter, so when you see the 2-year term in the proposed charter, it's only picked up from the current charter.
Okay,
We could make it coterminous, Mayor. I'm a former Corp Council and I would not want to have a 2-year term with a mayor that didn't want me to serve as his or her Corp Council. But I'm just telling you, the language that we have in the proposed draft is the oh, actually, we changed it to coterminous, to make it coterminous. All right, so we did do that. All right, I'm just looking. Yep, but under the current charter, it's 2 years, by the way,
okay,
but we made it coterminous. So I'll have a note here that the council will discuss the coterminous appointments of the police commission, so that in that case, Councilmember Nijoski-Eichner, that would be an exception to the rule. So the mayor gets to make those appointments of those 2 commissions in that way when he or she takes office. But you guys will discuss it and give us instructions on that. So open meetings. Did I discuss open meetings already? Not
No,
really.
but Steve, it's Patsy, on page 53, 72A1, the last sentence needs to be corrected. The mayor shall be ex officio a member of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. The mayor shall be an ex officio member.
What section is this?
It's on page 53, 72A1. Last sentence.
Oh, shall be an ex officio member. Got it.
Yeah, okay.
Got it. All right. All right. Again, this section 7-1A 3 is a new section. It doesn't state anything other than what the law is, but again, in the concept of I've been throwing into chart or recommending that charter commissions and charters include provisions that just underscore optimal public accessibility for meetings, strict compliance with the requirements of state law, utilization of technology provided by the city, and continued migration. So I did discuss that a few minutes ago. The administrative requirements are the requirements, we kind of gone over it a little bit, so I'll just go through it quickly. That basically talks about the elements that when you create a board or commission, these are the things you need to think about. You need to think about compliance with minority party representation. You need to talk about something as simple as appointment of a chair, the keeping of records, public access, going to the point that was made in the public discussion today, public access, comment, and interaction, including but not limited to public speaking, comment on, and any applicable rules and protocols as may be enacted by ordinance or in the absence of an ordinance by the rules of the board or commission. And so what that basically says that either by ordinance, when you as a council create a board or commission, or by the rules of the board or commission, if it's silent in your ordinance, they need to address the issue of public access and public interaction. I've had charters where we've dealt with more robustly, but again, that could be something you look at in the next 2 years. We have the frequency requirement. The reason for the frequency requirement is that non-attendance at meetings by a member of a board or commission, if you go into the section on removal, is one of the bases for removal, persistent absence. And so if you don't have a frequency requirement, how do you establish frequent absence as a standard for removal? And that's the genesis of creating those types of provisions in charters. I think that's it. Then we go on to the current boards. There are really no changes except for the police and fire. And then the mayor just brought up an issue regarding the appointments for police and fire that you guys will need to discuss. That you'll need to discuss before you send this back to the commission. And then what we did as well is we listed in the charter those positions that are mandated, not created by the charter, mandated by the charter, meaning that you will have to in many cases you have ordinances, but you will have to create ordinances to accommodate these various boards and commissions. There's one that doesn't look like a significant commission, but when we were going through and discussing all of the pension provisions, it turned out we found about this food services pension board. And so those commissions will have to be populated by ordinance so that you have the flexibility to modify them, the flexibility to merge them if you choose to do so. And if you go to 7-4 or 7-5, it allows for the consolidation or merger of boards and commissions so long as the functions of any of those entities are met. If they're now in this case, you're mandating the creation of the entity, and by virtue of that, you have to ultimately address the issue of the vibrancy of the entity. One of the commissions that's on this list, I normally recommend be placed in the charter. And for whatever reasons, I think we were just trying to get this thing done and into the council because it was a mammoth consolidation document. I normally recommend that boards of ethics be created by the charter, in the charter, locked in stone so that you can't modify or eliminate or dilute the effectiveness of a board of ethics. Again, that's something you may think about in the next cycle. So that takes us through boards and commissions. Are there any further questions? Without being presumptuous, I'll move to Article 8, which is the last of our sections for tonight. Patsy, you have a question?
No, I just tried to put my hand down. No.
Oh, well, your hand is up. So Now we're in the department section. And again, the objective here, and one of the nice things I will say about your current charter, it's probably one of the nice things I will say is that you don't have a lot of prescriptive layout of different departments. You have, unfortunately, some departments that don't exist, like a welfare department and things like that are in your current charter. But it was relatively easy to make the move toward the direction that this section of the charter addresses, and that is the idea is to have kind of a functional analysis of what the services are that you want to provide through your departments. And so as opposed to creating a parks department or parks and recreation department or a infrastructure or a public works department, the objective here is to give the mayor and the council the ability through ordinance to create the structure of government, so long as the functions that are set forth in the charter are met by the departments that are created by ordinance. And so the objective, obviously, is to make sure that we have powers, duties, and functions that are defined in the charter, and that so that you have an ability to be responsive to the needs of the residents, but rigid enough to make sure that you're not eliminating anything that should be provided, and flexible enough to be innovative and meet modern demands of a city in the 21st century. So what we do here is we address the appointment authority, appointment and confirmation. It's laid out very clearly in Article 8-2. There's different categories. There are people that are appointed solely by the mayor without confirmation, chief of staff, corporation counsel. There are people appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the council. I think all of the chiefs, the chief financial officer, economic development, human resources, operation and public works and community services. And then you have other department heads, and this is where Nora raised the question about the other executive level employees. This is one I still want to clarify whether any of these people are department heads. The controller, purchasing agent, tax collector. We know an assistant tax collector is not a department head. So that's where I came up with the term other executive level appointees. So we go through there and make clear that those positions are all subject to confirmation by the council, appointed by the mayor, and confirmation where the charter makes clear that there's confirmation. The other thing that's very clear in this charter is that these titles exist today. The CFO is the title that is the used to call the finance director. Now they're calling them CFOs, and they may call them something else in 10 years. You're not locked into this title because by reorganization, you can retitle any of the directors, any of the chiefs. You can reorganize their functions so long as the functions are met. The charter was kind of reverse engineered, the draft charter, to kind of meet what the government looks like right now, so that people have some sense of what the structure is. I think that if there are significant reorganizations, maybe we should put a provision in the charter that says this. I think that we should put a note in the section of the charter to indicate that the department has set forth, the division is set forth in the charter, has been modified by ordinance section such and such, whatever it may be. But the idea is to try to give you maximum flexibility, at the same time, give the voters an idea of what is in here. Police and fire chiefs are not appointed by the mayor. They're appointed by their board or their boards, the fire and police board.
Right, the board of police commissioners and fire commissioners.
Yeah, so that's
Like
laid
the
out.
chief.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's laid out pretty clearly as well. Those are not mayoral appointments. And I believe, am I correct? I think that the council appoints the board of ethics, or am I getting you confused with Stanford? I think Stanford does that. No, I think all the appointments are mayoral appointments.
Yeah, the council appoints the board of ethics.
They do. Okay. All right. I was right. All right. So then these are the functions. that are laid out. And what we've done is we've laid out the finance functions and approved appointees, the economic development and community development functions that are currently constituted under your charter, human resources, operations, community services, and then public safety. The only departments that are actually set forth and mandated is the law department with the corporation council, the police department, and the fire department. I didn't want to eliminate those departments and make it optional to have them. I think the commission thought it would be a political problem if we eliminated the police and fire departments. But they're all subject, all the departments are subject to reorganization and to consolidation if necessary. And the way that is done is the council and the mayor will work together to create the reorganization. And then in the end, the corporation council has to provide an opinion indicating that all the functions set forth in the charter are met by the reorganization. So if you're consolidating operations with, I don't know you want to take, let's see what you might do. You're pretty well organized, I got to tell you. Your current structure is pretty well organized, but if you wanted to move things around a little bit, you could do it, but the Corp Council would have to opine before it took effect that the functions that are set forth in the charter are being met by the reorganized department. The other thing you'll see in this section, I didn't point it out in the PowerPoint, is you'll see transition provisions. In several cases, there are historical provisions relating to the finance. I think finance is one, finance department. Also with the controller, the purchasing agent, the tax collector as well. And at the back of the document, we'll get to these later on in Article 14. We used to call this the sunset provision, but it's not really a sunset. It's historical transition provisions. We've moved all of these functions that were in the special act that really were very rabbit hole-ish, jumping down the rabbit hole for each of these departments. They continue to survive in the charter until such time as the council approves, presumably with the assistance of the administration, modified descriptions of those functions and departments. Again, you don't need a lot to make those things happen, but what you need to do is look through and see those priorities that you want to make sure are met as you move those from the charter to the code of ordinances. Once you've done them all, that section of the charter will fall off. That's the Houdini section. That section will disappear once you go through and move those charter functions, those traditional historical charter provisions into the code of ordinances, and basically kind of modernize the approach that you're taking. If the council ultimately decides, as you're looking at these sections, that there are important procedural things in there that you think need to remain in the charter, you have the alternative of not moving them and then addressing it in the charter revision in the next 2 years. So that's how that works. I hope that's clear. That takes us through the executive function, the executive departments. I think I've covered everything. Are there any questions? Councilmember Najilski-Eichner.
Thank you so much, Steve. That is clear, and I really appreciate the explanation. Now I get very much more what you were doing, and that's very helpful with the historical transition. That makes sense. I have nits that I'll send you, but just a few things that I was trying to yeah, that's fine. Okay. Just a small thing that I think might just help with preventing confusion. 8.5 should be titled economic development and economic and community development. Because 8.6 is, or 8.8 is community services. So that's a nit that might actually be confusing, unlike most of the others.
Let me get there. 8.5.
And community,
Economic
yeah.
and
And-
community development. Okay,
And then 8.8 is community services.
got it. Did I get that? one? Yeah, that one's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then in 8.8, I liked the language at the very end of 8.8A about the chief serving as a liaison to state and federal agencies within the purview of the division. Or I guess, I don't know if I liked it per se, but it struck me that that is something that many of our chiefs do in other function areas. And I didn't know if there was a reason that was called out specifically in community services, if that is important enough to put in other people's job descriptions. But it just jumped out at me as,
What we did is I was working with the mayor's office at looking at the different functions and how they work. And I believe that this is actually found in the community, maybe whether it's in the ordinance or whether is otherwise addressed. But I have no problem. I don't know if you want it to be a general, ultimately the mayor is the liaison to state and federal agencies as the chief executive officer. If there are other division chiefs where that is useful, or if you think it should be a generic authority for all the division chiefs, that's really your call. I have no look, I was very active in the National League of Cities when I was a member of my board of alders. I believe devoutly in intergovernmental connections. And I think department heads should be active, should be involved with GFOA and the NLC and all the other organizations that are out there. I think the city is better for that. So that's your call. But it was not done it was not done intentionally to distinguish them from others. I think it was done that way because that's kind of what was in their portfolio.
right. No, and I think you're right. I think it's the sort of thing that probably would be best if it's a general sort of role for everyone. But that's, thank you. I just wanted to check on that.
Mr. Burnett.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Attorney Mednick, question on 8-2.3, which I believe page 68. I'm curious as to why under appointments by mayor and confirmation by common council, the recreation and parks director position is not listed here.
I don't know. It's possible we weren't told that that was one of the position that is that the case?
I believe it is. I could stand to be corrected, but I believe it is.
So it's parks and recreation?
We've recreation and parks.
Recreation and parks.
Unless someone on the call can correct me, or Mayor, do you have any?
We can check that. If that's factually correct, we should just fix it.
Right.
I think my page 68 is different than yours, Mr. Burnett. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if I could add in, I don't notice Public Works either.
Yeah.
Barbara, the chief of operations and public works is under A2D, or did you mean a department head under that?
What page, Nora?
Just above.
Sure, on page
68.
68?
Oh, it's 60 of my version. Sorry.
60, okay.
It's 8.2A2. And item D is chief of operations.
Oh,
and
yep,
public
yep,
works.
okay, got it.
Was there?
Yeah, I saw it there, I just didn't see the description.
Yeah, was there?
That's the chief. That's the chief.
Okay,
It's covered by that.
So Barbara, in terms of the description, if you look at 66, it's currently headlined Chief Operating Officer instead of Chief of Operations. That was one of the nits I was going to pass on to Steve.
okay.
So
and I was
it's
confused by that.
8-7B. Yeah. No, I was too. It took me a minute to sort.
You'll get me that? Nit? Fixer? Chief Operator, what is it called?
We call it Chief of Operations rather than Chief Operating Officer.
Okay,
Thanks, Nora.
got it.
Very welcome.
Thank you,
Mr. Burnett,
everybody. Greg, I'll take a look at the Recreation and Parks.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Any other questions?
Medic?
Yes.
Yeah, the titles, I just checking the city website. It's the Director of Recreation and Parks. And the other position is Superintendent of Parks and Public Property. Was that the answer? Was that the titles you were looking for confirmation on?
I think we were looking for whether or not those people are appointed by the mayor and approved by the council.
I think the Director of Recreation and Parks, that would be Mr. Stowers, he reports directly to the Chief of Operations.
And Recreations and Parks is listed under B1, Departments and Direct Reports to the Division Chief, which I don't know if that should be
Yeah.
Chief of Operations as well, but it is listed there.
And I do
Yeah.
remember voting to approve Mr. Stowers.
Yes.
All right. I'll just confirm it. I'll fix it. I don't think, I think that's a nit that I can fix as a Scrivener's correction as opposed to a recommendation. I'll try to do that. I'm not going to, on the substantive things, I will wait for your direction, but on something like that, I will fix it if that's okay with you. Anything else? Anybody? David Hovelman or?
Yeah,
Councilor?
just a question. Statutorily, do we have to have a COO,
No,
a Chief Operating Officer, so we can make that change of that name?
no. The only two, as I've said before, the only two required positions under a charter are the chief executive, your mayor, and you, the council.
Okay,
Those are the only two absolute requirements.
okay. Great, thank you.
And statutory superintendent of schools is required under the Board of Education statutes, but yeah, but the rest of them are all, you have a lot of latitude.
Thank you.
Patsy, is your hand up or is it just?
No, it should be down.
Okay,
Sorry.
I didn't want to ignore my chair.
No,
Mayor, if there are no other questions, I've taken us through the sections that we were going to review today.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, thank you. I think you explained it rather well, and I'm happy to hear all the questions so we can get clarification and make sure we're on the right track and find changes where they're needed.
yes, and I will get the updates based on tonight's meeting as I did last week. I'll get them out to you shortly in the next few days. And we're meeting next, Mr. President, on the 26th. Am I correct?
I will confirm with you to make that determination.
All right.
We have a full agenda currently on the 26th, so
Okay.
the next meeting will to be determined.
All right. Just to tell you, the week of that week, I'm clear on the 27th. I'm clear on the 29th. I have one of my public hearings. I have Stanford public hearing on the 28th. So, and I imagine at that next meeting, we would probably discuss budget and try to walk through the remainder of the charter.
Yes, that would be Articles 9 through 14.
I would
That
say,
will
yeah,
complete the entire charter.
And the other thing I wanted to say, I know I've written to you privately about this. We need at some point to come to a conclusion on all of the voting standards for the council. So I think everybody should look at those standards. Remember, I yellowed them in your transmittal document. All those sections were yellowed. You may not want to change any of them. I just wanted to make sure everybody looked at them and decided whether or not the standard, what standard should apply, whether the definition should be applied everywhere or whether you want to have alternate standards throughout the charter. So I just thought this is an opportunity to clean up procedurally how you vote on certain things under the charter. So I want to make sure we don't forget that little project. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attention.
If there's no further questions, we can turn to Ms. Revolus. Or not. Anybody else want to make the motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. No, my
Sorry, go
phone
ahead.
was acting up. Don't, all of you fall back. Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
All in favor? We are
Thank you,
adjourned
everyone.
at 8:59. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.